Life is prayer. Good to see you. Life is prayer. Life is prayer says pray for an ICE revival where agents quit to follow love. On that note, a video that I caught and watched way too many times of two Christian nationalist preachers having a conversation. And they were having a conversation about, the heroics of joining ICE. They were talking about how if you join ICE, you can be one of, and I quote, God's appointed avenger. You could be fighting against evil. You could be fighting against things that God sees as evil, and he sees God. Immigration, they say, is evil. Immigration is evil, they say, that these people are coming and they're eating up your inheritance that your fathers left you through their hard work, through their blood, their sweat, their tears, that these immigrants are coming and they're going to devour. They're going to devour everything. All that is yours and all that should be yours and all that should be and is precious to you. They talk about how this is a righteous thing. It's a righteous thing, they say, to join ICE and to throw people in the back of vans where they will be driven away to detention centers and thrown out of the country. It's a righteous thing, they say, to, in their words, if you're lucky enough, you'll get to go to Portland or Chicago and throw libs to the ground. They say joining ICE so that you can do this kind of torment. My word, not theirs. Oh, you'll make Jesus smile. If you choose to go and do this thing, if you choose to go and be an appointed avenger, a godly appointed avenger, a member of ICE, that you'll make Jesus smile. There's so much in what they're saying that is just garbage. They're just spewing garbage at this point. It honestly, it almost sounded like, how sometimes you go on somebody's channel and you're watching a video and about halfway through the video they say, and today's sponsor is Brain Quest, the website that gives you big brains. It sounded to me like they were literally offering an advertisement for ICE. The way they were promoting it, the way they were pumping it up. It was like they were saying, you got to join, Uncle Sam needs you. Yeah, that's what it was. It was like a recruiting poster. The idea that, I don't like it, but I guess I could be fine with somebody saying, everybody should join ICE and you get to do this and this and this and you get to do that and that and that. And you can kick some person's ass and you can do this horrible thing to those people, and those people with the purple hair, you get to beat them up. But when they say that this is that basically it boils down to, you can be a warrior for God. You can be a righteous warrior for God, doing God's work. By doing these violent things without judgment, violent things. They're talking about doing violent things, throwing libs to the ground. That's a violent act. By doing violence against your neighbor, you'll make Jesus smile. Now, there's a story. We've talked about it in the past. Guards come to arrest Jesus one night. And they come at him and they ask him some questions, and, he says who he is, and Peter lunges forward with a sword and takes the ear off. He takes the ear off one of the men who've come to arrest Jesus. Now, before Jesus heals this person's ear, before he heals the person's ear, Jesus turns to Peter and says, "Put that thing away. That isn't what I meant when I said get swords. That's not what this is about. Put it away." Jesus would never have been okay with his followers committing acts of violence against others. Against protesters? Absolutely not. And absolutely not against immigrants. He would never have been okay with people committing acts of violence against the least of these, against people that are on the margins, against people who are just looking for a better life. And he certainly he wouldn't be okay with us committing acts of violence against those who are standing beside them. Jesus wasn't okay with an act of violence committed against people who were there to take him, arrest him, try him, and kill him. He's certainly not going to be okay with throwing a lib to the ground. In our Christian age, in our Christian understanding of the world, listen, God has appointed warriors. God has warriors. I believe that. I believe there are men and women who are out there who are warriors for God, who are warriors for Christ. Absolutely. They are out there. They are among us. I hope in this room, many of us could say, that's who I aspire to be. But the kind of warrior we're supposed to be, the world has rarely seen. It's certainly not the kind of warrior that puts on literal armor, a literal helm, picks up a literal sword or axe or weapon of some kind. That is not the kind of warrior that God asks us as followers of Jesus to be. Absolutely not. God, that's a waste. It is a waste of resources. It's a waste of energy, because the mission isn't about destruction. The mission of a godly warrior is not about the destruction of anybody else. It's about birth. It's about restoration. It's about healing. It's about creation. It's about provision. I remember years ago, I think it was my first year of seminary, I read a biography of a guy named Ignatius. You've heard me talk about Ignatius of Loyola. I love Ignatius of Loyola. You know, I don't necessarily know about his followers and all that they've done, but that early crowd, I can get behind that. Well, part of his story is that he was injured in a battle. Ignatius, he was a Spaniard. They were at war with some group or another, and he was injured in a battle. And a cannonball, at least from my understanding, is a cannonball damaged his leg quite badly. And while he was in a hospital, recovering from his injuries, the nuns there would bring him something to read, and it was just, he couldn't get through it. It was drivel. He didn't like it. And I think it was his brother or his family or his friends, they brought him a book about the great medieval warriors, right? And he would flip through that, and he'd read about all these exploits of these knights, these soldiers, and these generals, these emperors, and these stories of battles and these stories of conquest, where men killed one another, they beat one another, they ravaged and tore through one another's nations and communities. These people who in this book that he was reading were held up as honorable, noble, powerful men that all of us should aspire to be. The nuns weren't having it. They wanted that book as far away from their presence as they could possibly make it, and so they took it away from him. Now remember, these nuns, they weren't just helping him recover. They were They were taking care of all kinds of people, all kinds of men, all kinds of soldiers who had been injured by cannonballs and the slash of a sword and the firing of a musket. They lived in the aftermath of all the things that this book held up and glorified. These nuns, their lives were devoted to cleaning up after these idiotic men and their idiotic ambitions. And so they gave him a book about God's warriors, about God's knights, God's soldiers. It was a book of saints. And so we began reading the biographies of these saints, these stories of these saints. And he came to understand that these men and women, in their context, were acting so much more courageously than any other knight, than any soldier, than any emperor, than any general. These men and women, these saints, had lived lives that were so much bolder, so much more courageous than anybody who'd ever wielded a sword or an axe or a spear or a lance. Anybody who'd ever fired a cannon, anybody who had ever besieged a castle. These saints that he was reading about had sacrificed far more than those honorable men he had admired. And it was in reading this book that he decided he was going to commit himself to being a soldier for Jesus. We're supposed to be warriors for God. And we are supposed to be courageous for God. And we are supposed to be bold in doing God's work in this world. And we are supposed to persevere in doing so. And we are supposed to give our all to the mission, all to the purpose, if you want to use the language, all to the battle. But for the Christian, the mission, the purpose, the battle, the thing that we are supposed to be engaged in, our only tool, our only weapon is love. We are supposed to be bringing love into this world. We are supposed to be healing this world with love. We are supposed to be providing for the people in this world through our love. We're supposed to be sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ in this world as we demonstrate love. You want to make Jesus smile? Put down your weapons and love. If you really want to make Jesus smile, put down your weapons and feed someone. If you really want to make Jesus smile, stop calling people to do horrible things against their neighbors. Stop calling people to do violent things against their neighbors. And stop doing so, claiming that this is going to make God happy. We demonstrate our love for God by demonstrating our love for others. I read that somewhere. It's in some book. Amen.